Okay, so hello everyone, for those who are joining live and those who will be watching this. I'm Jess. I'm facilitating this panel discussion as part of the Madrid WUDC training week. This discussion is about organising international competitions in developing circuits. I'm joined by a very, I think, highly respected panel, those who have significant experience in organising these events. I can just hear a bit of feedback. I will ask each of them to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about themselves. I might start with you, Fardeen.
Right, hi. So my name is Fardeen Ameen. I'm currently director of the Bangladesh Debating Council, and I've been actively organizing debate tournaments from as far back as 2013, where I began organizing voluntarily for the Bangladesh Debating Council before going on to take a leadership position there. So two tournaments I've run that you may recognize are IUB Ascension, which is sort of, I'm really proud to say, the sort of flagship international brand of, I would like to say, South Asia, one of the tournaments in South Asia, which has done a lot to bring in global attention and participation. We've hosted multiple editions of Ascension from 2016 to 2019. And most recently, I was one of the conveners for the United Asian Debating Championship 2020. The first one to be held digitally and the first one hosted by a Bangladeshi institution.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Having had the fortune of being going to Ascension the year before last, I might go next to, is it Eze? Easy?
Eze.
Eze.
Yeah. Hi. Hi everyone. My name is Eze Nwakuba. The Pan-African University Debate Council Chairperson and the founder of Organizing. And I've posted quite a number of events. I was also on the organizing team for the UADC Debating Championship. I think one of the foremost online tournaments that were global sometime last year. And then, particularly in the African region, I convened the Pan-African Debating Championship in 2020. And then I've also hosted like a number of other tournaments, the Women's Open, and then like lockdown of TXT. And after tournaments as well, we hosted the Article certification course last year, which had participation from across 21 or 26 countries, from across 5 continents. So it was really huge. So it was just, a training camp for adjudicators. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And over to Apratim.
So, hi, my name is Apratim. I'm the current vice chair of the UADC Council, and I've been involved with training and organizing tournaments in Nepal for the past 4 years. 9th grade was when I first got into debating. I think the universe just sort of decided that I was going to spend every single one of my weekends of my teenage years debating. So my friends used to perhaps go to movies, and I used to tell them that I have WSDC practice. 11th grade is when in the circuit I started coring at tournaments. And if you're a Nepali core, then you probably do a lot, like a bit of everything for the tournament. So you tap, you're the OC, you basically run the entire tournament. And I think that's where I got my first experiences into organizing tournaments. When we started out in the Nepali debating circuit back in, I think, 2016, 17 is when I got in. We had around 12 people. We didn't have international experiences. We basically just did tournaments because Pradeep Dai, who's our founder, went to Netherlands and found that the activity is insanely exciting, and somehow that's something that we should perhaps pursue. But I think a lot later, I saw the circuit perhaps growing into something really big. And I think we owe a lot of that towards just international tournaments within Nepal itself, but also towards our neighbors, for example, like Fardeen Vice tournaments and Ascension and stuff. I think so it was my first year in WSDC where we almost like reached breaks. I think after that, we've had breaks at majors. We've like won international tournaments. We've top taps. So yeah, that's essentially Nepal, and that's me.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for that. So I'm sort of looking forward to getting into this discussion and asking you some questions. I might, if it's okay, just kind of stick to the same sort of speaking order throughout, but do jump in and interact and respond. So you've all kind of touched on the tournaments you have been involved with, and they're all at different stages. They've had different responses. They're sort of, some are stable part of your circuits and others somewhat newer. So I kind of want to go into a little bit more detail what, those are. I guess what some of the biggest challenges were in organising these events and how you've overcome some of those things. I know that's quite a general question, but any of, I guess, the key kind of issues that come to mind, because I'm sort of interested to know whether they're kind of the same across developing circuits or are they very much to the circuit in question. So Fardeen.
I think organizing tournaments within a developing country certainly has its unique set of challenges, especially international tournaments. Infrastructure itself is a huge barrier. So, for example, when people make their annual calendars of tournaments they want to attend internationally, it's not just the tournament. They also think of like attractions. They also think of hotels and so on and so forth. And ease of travel itself is very difficult for the Bangladeshi circuit. The flights are expensive. The country doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to things like tourism. And then once you arrive here, and when we're setting up for people to arrive, we really have to overcompensate and ensure the absolute best of facilities. The margin of risk is very low. So you can't take any risks. So you have to sort of shell out a premium for whatever you're doing. So I think many countries, based on their natural beauty, based on their inherent access, can have the ability to capitalize on those natural resources and just host any sort of tournament. Whereas I feel if I am to host an international tournament in Bangladesh, it has to be absolutely premium in everything we offer. Without that, we wouldn't be able to have participation. And that is why I think we've managed to only create one international brand. I think if it was easier, then we would have had many more international tournaments happening in our country as well. But I'm still glad we managed to get one launched, and that hopefully it's the starting point.
It sounds like a lot of pressure when you feel like you have to do it absolutely perfect. What about you? What are some of the challenges that you've encountered and how you've tried to overcome those?
Okay. First of all, I'll start by saying I like the way Fardeen particularly uses the term developing countries, because Nigeria, for example, or the rest of Africa may be a developing society, but debating here cannot necessarily be termed as a developing circuit because unlike Fardeen's experience, online tournaments specifically because of the COVID-19 challenges have become the order of the day here in Africa. So even besides the ones that are huge, like every weekend or every other weekend around here, the debating culture in Africa is immense, it's intense, and it's very vibrant. So when we started, because when we started hosting online tournaments of this magnitude, it was sometime in 2017, January. And back then, it wasn't because of COVID-19. It was specifically because we needed to give more access to people. We understood that, with tight budgets from universities and from, colleges and all of that, even attending the, Pan-African Debating Festival at the end of the year can sometimes be challenging. So even institutions who have, let's say, very bright, intelligent, smart debaters who would have loved to register a lot more teams, find it incredibly difficult to do that, because of very tight budgets and then flights and all of that. So oftentimes it becomes a special preserve for one, either those who have been much more advanced in the circuit or in their club, or two, those who are able to seek alternative funding, right, and are able to attend those tournaments. So when we started, it was basically so that we can break those barriers. So it meant a lot more people could, participate in that cultural exchange. while in the comfort of their homes, and that was as far back as 2017. The challenges there then became, also like Fardeen mentioned, infrastructure, but specifically in terms of, internet connection, because it might seem like a really trivial-ish, but because down here, like internet connection or data bundles, can sometimes prove to be a luxury. So it's sometimes difficult to expect people to, be able to seamlessly participate in those kind of events. But then what we managed to do, specifically with the PAUDC 2020 that we hosted, is being able to galvanize, support or help institutions by using, official mails and letters, and allowing them acquire these, piece of infrastructure, internet, basically on a bulk scale. So since we are no longer particularly spending money in flights and very expensive registration fees, people are now able to maybe acquire these data bundles and then use that to camp their students. So quite a number of institutions that participated at the PAUDC 2020 didn't participate from the comfort of their homes. They had to converge like they would have done for a real tournament, but they were doing this just at their campuses, and they were able to, share data and be able to have like, those kind of things. Then the other challenge, which is quite significant to me specifically, because when I started hosting events, I did so because I wanted, I see till today, I see debating not just as a competitive sport, but as a life skill that's important for young people everywhere. So when we started hosting those events, we have always been, as priority, we have always been concerned about making sure that our tournaments are rewarded, right? Because if you come from this part of the world, I don't know what happens everywhere else, but if you come from this part of the world, even if you attend international tournaments and come back, and you come back with a trophy or a medal, your parents are most likely going to ask you, what, like, is this everything you went for? You probably left school for 1 or 2 weeks. You have been doing online training for the past 1 month just because you want to get a piece of metal. So we needed to kind of add more value to the sport. So the biggest challenge we've had was with getting sponsorship, because if you seek to have prize money, for example, for these tournaments, and you seek to generate them from registration costs, then you're not really providing the access that you wanted to provide in the first instance, because then you have to raise the registration costs very high. So what we tried to do was keep registration costs minimal, and then attempt to seek out sponsorship, which hasn't been very easy, but we've been largely successful in the past year. For example, with the Women's Open we had an anonymous person from the United States sent us $110 for prize money specifically. So it kind of made it easier, so that whatever was generated from registration costs went into like the cost of hosting the event in itself, and not necessarily bothering about how to split it and make sure that participants got their share. So basically, I think the biggest challenge is creating incentives, because the challenges for individuals will always exist. But if you provide incentives for them to want to surmount those individual challenges, then they're going to want to do that. So if you put up a tournament, for example, like there's one happening next weekend, and you say there's $150 for the winning team, people are going to want to do more, right? Maybe move out of their house, borrow data, or find electricity or stuff like that, just to ensure that they participate. So at the end of the day, we are building that culture, because we are making people love, or do extreme stuff for the sport that they love, but we are also rewarding them for that. So the biggest challenge I would say for me basically is acquiring funding in terms of prize sponsorship. Thanks.
No, thank you for that. I mean, my reflection is that I've been to quite a lot of worlds now, and I'm always kind of amazed by what I hear stories about in terms of fundraising efforts from debaters from the African debate circuit and securing that private sponsorship, which I think is like, I mean, if you compare that to, a lot of societies probably just take institutional funding for granted. And I think it's really impressive how all of that individual fundraising gets done. So Apratim, you're in I think, again, probably an even different situation. Tell us about it.
So the thing with Nepali tournaments is it's always a balancing act between quality and accessibility. And I think it's a little worse than other countries. The reason for this is, A, like any other developing country, we don't essentially have the institutions which are well enough for them to consider perhaps funding our tournaments or for funding our activity, which means that most of the money that we probably generate in these tournaments come from ourselves. But I think the problem becomes a lot more difficult for us is because as an economy, Nepal isn't that great, which means that even corporations that are here probably would not prioritize spending at a debate tournament or towards any sort of activity which is seen as an extracurricular, because since they have so little funds, they probably want to market to the best of their abilities. They go for the television stuff. So it becomes really difficult for us to just gather any sort of outside funds. So any sort of Nepali tournaments that you see, which are being organized, more often than not are simply organized literally based on the registration fees. And the challenge that poses is really difficult because at a point at which you're taking a lot of, like, let's say if you're charging registration fees too high for these kids, it just defeats the purpose of having the tournament within your own circuit, because it just excludes a lot of individuals within your own circuit who would probably benefit out of this tournament, and probably people who you would want to do these tournaments for. But if it's too low, then that's a problem as well. Because here's the thing, we're not only now in the online sphere competing with tournaments within our circuit, it's also tournaments outside our circuit. And there are outside institutions which are really well funded, which can probably give like extreme amount of IA compensations, which can give like high cash prizes, which means that it's really difficult for us to then to be able to compete with those tournaments and to be able to at least say that, let's say we have enough good Adjs or quality Adjs, so we can provide you a quality tournament. We need to have a substantial like pledge features to ensure that we can compete with them. I think the way that we found at least a workaround for it for now, for NTO, is that in phase 1 allocations, we ensure that we open the tournament to the outside world to make sure that maximum number of teams from the outside come in. And maybe after we're done with, and I think like what we're doing is we're completely subsidizing, let's say, cores and IAs. And once we're completely done with that, all the remaining money that we have, we're using it to subsidize Nepali teams. And that's really important for us to do just to make it a lot more accessible. But I think more just in terms of it's debating as an activity in this part of the world is just not seen as an activity that's worth pursuing, because I think the maximum focus in any of these developing countries is, oh, what's the utility they're bringing into a society? Which means that every single person has to face, let's say, massive challenges, even within their own homes, or in terms of, let's say, outside when you're going to ask for funding and stuff. I think I remember this really vividly because we wanted to go to WSTC Croatia, and it was really expensive for us to go there because flights are really expensive, the reg fee is really expensive, but like the national team had go and we had no way of ensuring any sort of funding coming in. And I remember we didn't spend any sort of time in terms of preparing for the competition because we just didn't have the privilege to do that, because we had to go out every single day. We had meetings with certain corporations to ensure that at least to have a chance of them funding us to a certain extent. And that even like all those months of asking for, let's say, money from those corporates didn't really culminate to anything. We had to fund it ourselves. So yeah, it's a huge problem for us for organizing these tournaments. And I think like while there are Western societies which at this point can have the ability to, let's say, make it a lot more accessible to a lot of these other people, like, for example, people in Nepal, people like India, or people in Bangladesh, for them to have quality access towards, tournaments with much quality because they have the privilege of having institutional funding. The point at which they too don't do it, I think it just becomes a lot more difficult for us overall, just in the debating sphere.
Okay, that's very interesting. I mean, I think it's very hard for me to conceptualize what it must be like having to go to a meeting with a corporation just to get some, your funding covered. But I guess that is the reality. So I guess this is a nice segue into the next question. And it's basically about what, I guess, circuits that might be more developed or circuits that might have more privilege and specific debaters within those circuits, what they can do to kind of assist these efforts. And I suppose there's some very obvious ones that come to my mind. Like, for example, if you can spare some rounds to come judge for free and you're a good judge, go do that. That seems very obvious though. So I'm just wondering, is there anything more specific that other circuits and other debaters can be doing? And again, starting with you, Fardeen, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think a good example for this is how much the Malaysian circuit helped the Bangladeshi circuit in its earlier days. Bangladesh actually hosted a physical version of ABP in 2011, and at that time it was revolutionary for that to happen here. And just a few years prior to that, the stories I used to hear from my seniors was that he would go to a BP tournament and he would see that like 4 people are prepping together because we just did not have sufficient knowledge of how BP works. Because English debate in Bangladesh started from people crossing over from Bengali language debating, which takes place in 3 versus 3 format and not BP. So people really didn't know how it works. And in the very early days, we had some of the veterans from the Malaysian circuit like voluntarily taking sessions. So Tasnim Elias, Muhammad Abdul Latif from IIUM, they took a lot of sort of basic level sessions into not just how debating works, but the benefits it can provide, how the benefits a tabbing software can provide, how it can sort of build institutions within educational institutions like clubs, how those clubs can transform into becoming influential spheres within institutions. This sort of inspiration was really important as a catalyst. So I think institutions who have the knowledge and the privilege, beyond just taking workshops and taking sessions, if they can really inspire and sell the dream of how far debating or organizing a debating club can take you, that adds massive value. And I see, as Apratim was alluding to earlier, the Nepali circuit has really evolved very quickly. And I remember around maybe 6-7 years ago, we had a Nepali institution coming to debate in Bangladesh for the first time, and they actually stayed at my house for the duration of that tournament. And from that to the next time I saw them, they came in like dozens. So there was a very quick evolution there. So I could see that just one simple act of inspiration where there was an invitation for them to participate in Bangladesh gave them the courage to sort of galvanize and get more people into the sport. And we also had a similar source of encouragement from the Asian circuit, like Malaysian circuit, Singaporean circuit, when Bangladesh debate was just starting out. And with things like these Zoom sessions with YouTube academies, I think it's become a lot easier to funnel that inspiration out. You don't have to fly people in anymore. So I think the ability to inspire circuits is out there more than ever, and actively, if we can make an effort to encourage newer countries to start debating, that would be a massive feel-good factor for the entire sport. So we've seen Nepal enter the sport. We could perhaps see something similar. I don't see a lot of participation from Sri Lankan universities in UADC or ABP, but I know they have a very strong WSDC program. So maybe they're just missing that connection, that communication, that these avenues are also open for them. So if people make the effort to reach out, inspire, sort of just show people where to start, because it can get very confusing. There are multiple formats, multiple tournaments, registration fees. You don't understand open tournaments, institutional tournaments. You don't understand what all of these things mean initially. But if you sort of have a guiding hand or a big brother type figure to go to, I think we can see new circuits, new countries themselves being created, and that I think is a very fulfilling part of the activity. And I can see that happening a lot more in this online era of debating.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I, again, never would have kind of thought of inspiration as like a something that sort of is an output from the circuit, but I definitely understand what you mean. I suppose moving to you next, Eze, what struck me was that I don't know if you were, how involved you were in Uhuru Worlds, but I understand that that was a very significant thing for the African debate circuit. And I know that a lot of the calls were sort of asking judges to come, lend their time essentially to judge that tournament. So I guess noting that as an example, but obviously talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. What can circuits do to help?
Okay, thank you. So Firstly, I'm going to just say that, privilege, I think, is supposed to be used or channeled in the direction where it is lacking, like privilege should move from where it's abundant to where it's lacking. So within the African debating circuit, for example, all the countries in Africa aren't necessarily at the same level of debating, or the culture isn't as intense in some parts. But it's something that particularly significant that's done here. So when you see very big names in the African debating circuit who have attended lots of KBCs and broken or won at those tournaments, just like you said, they are not they are almost always eager to want to share that experience, or to want to go ahead and see a tournament in a country where the debating culture is just being roomed, or they are almost always available to also participate in the tournaments that are happening there. So in the way basically that people who are in have some difficulty with that saying developing circuit, because if you experience the African debating circuit, especially with the whole world, and even with UADC, who they started debating championship last year, you would know that like debaters from here, like two debaters from here, can give anybody in the world a run for their money, basically. So the reason why then the tag of developing is now attached is basically because of access, essentially. So I do think that it even boils down to things as simple as going ahead to attend those tournaments, right, and being able to pay. Because I'm going to give you an instance. When, for example, a registry of 70 British pounds, 80 British pounds, or 50 British pounds, people, pay for those tournaments. Those tournaments have like rooms numbering to 20, 30, 40 rooms that are there. But when you see, an Uhuru World, for example, or any other huge African debating tournament that is charging $5, the same people who attend $50 or £50 registration, it shows, it passes a message basically about how people in those other privileged circuits view tournaments that are hosted by people in underprivileged circuits. So I think it just starts with the idea of making or demonstrating truly that debating at the global circuit needs to be how do I put it now? Needs to truly be a cross-culture kind of thing, right? People just need to maybe acknowledge this tournament some more, if I have to use that word, right? People need to acknowledge this tournament some more, not just in going ahead to judge, but in going ahead to pay registration and attend. Because for lots of institutions, in Africa, for example, they're not looking to make profit, right? Even if they do make a couple of profits at the end of the day, this is something that they are doing basically to survive, to be able to attend, tournaments at the end of the day, to be able to still pay for some of those, like WUDC, for example, or some of those other foreign tournaments that are happening. So essentially, I kind of find it awkward or weird that you're going to have a $50 tournament for an individual, and then you have 40 rooms, and then a huge tournament happening in Africa that is free of charge, or that is $5, and then you don't see people from these privileged circuits moving towards. So while we may say it is something you do for developing circuits, I do think that more important is something you do for yourself. That's the way I see it, right? Over the weekend, I was sharing my experience with middle school debaters in China, and because of the time zone differences, I was having to stay up in weird times, not because I was debating or judging, but basically because I was just coaching and sharing experiences with them. I felt very relieved this morning when I saw all the praises from their parents who were excited about their development. I just basically think that that's what it is. That gratification I feel from knowing that I spent all of my nights this past weekend, teaching kids, debating, sparking that particular passion in them and making them love what they do, and being in love with it at such a tender age is something that is just particularly rewarding. So I also think that it equally would or should be rewarding for people in developing circuits to be able to share their experiences at these other tournaments, or at least basically just come compete, right? Just to sound a little bit boastful, I would say, not taking up that challenge when tournaments are free of charge or as cheap as we know that they can afford, not taking up that challenge to speak at those tournaments kind of makes me wonder, right, whether there's a certain, fear of wanting to compete with people from, other aspects of the world. Then the second one is the obvious one, which is about registration fees and waivers and all of that, right? I just think, people in other circuits need to make their tournaments a lot more accessible in terms of registration fees, and even when you do registration fees, in terms of offering, waivers for like people who are coming from these other, less privileged institutions. But basically, I just think it boils down to perception. The way we view, tournaments that are happening in developing sectors like in Africa is important, right? When you see people put up forms, for example, and that forms for application for either IAs or CAPs or whatever, you notice that there's a subtle how do I put it, for African tournaments. So when you say, to be qualified, for example, to get $10 for each round you judge at this particular tournament, you need to have judged at major tournaments, and then you put examples in brackets, and you put UADC, you put maybe Manchester Ivy, you put WUDC, and you know that there's a regional PAUDC, for example, you leave it out from that bracket, or you know that there's some other huge tournament that's happened in Africa, like the Whole World UADC, Royal Research Anniversary Cups and all of those things. You don't, or you ignore them. So when you're mentioning examples, you're specifically mentioning examples of tournaments you consider to be prestigious. This may be very subtle, but the psychological effects, are huge, because it makes even debaters who participate, African debaters who participate in African tournaments, oftentimes feel like they haven't done enough for their CV, right? They might have attended 20 tournaments in the past year, they might have won 15 out of those 20 tournaments, but because the kind of examples they see when they want to apply for CAP, for foreign tournaments, or when they want to apply for IAs, are not the examples that they can resonate with. So it kind of just seems like, even though you have done all of those tournaments, you still need to do more from the other side, or you're not necessarily feeling equipped, as a matter of fact. So I don't think, that subtle things like that, address how people from other circuits see debating tournaments that are hosted by developing circuits or less privileged circuits. Those subtle actions need to, change. We need to acknowledge the fact that debating is debating everywhere, whether it's happening in Nigeria or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the comments around how we perceive different tournaments are 100% true. And I think the comments around registration fees are very timely, given the discussion that has been had on some Facebook groups like Debate Serious posting this week. Yes, Apratim, what do you think, particularly in your circuit, is most helpful from other debaters?
So for me, I think it's a lot more personal, because I've seen how this plays out. I think Fardeen Bhai underplays like Bangladesh's importance when it comes to what they've done for the Nepali circuit, which isn't just Fardeen Bhai allowed us accommodation at his place. He's told us to come to Ascension. He waived us our reg fee. He waived off our accommodation. He just said, get on a flight and come to Bangladesh and we'll take care of you. And that just meant a lot for like a lot of Nepali debaters who wanted to go to an international tournament, because then you went there and you saw your heroes who you've probably seen on YouTube give speeches in front of you, and you're being judged by like one of the best adjudicators in the world. I think it just inspired us to elevate our debating to a whole lot level and just put in a lot more effort. But I think more importantly, in terms of what Bangladesh has done for Nepal, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because this is a good idea in terms of what Western countries, or let's say what even like, let's say more developed circuits can do for smaller circuits, where I think for most tournaments that we had in Nepal, we had a core adjudicator who came from Bangladesh, who came to our country and who helped us perhaps like organize it, but secondly, just understand debating and stuff. On frequent basis, we had people like Adi Bhai come in, we had Adil Bhai come in, we had Wasif come in. I think it just, for every single tournament we had those. But also we had like these things called Tarkashalas, which essentially were workshops that we had. So these are 3-day workshops that we organized for our own debaters. But for every single one of those workshops that we've organized, a trainer has always been a Bangladeshi debater. And they've come in and they've trained us for the next, like proper, they've given us proper training for like 3 days and stuff. So I think when you have resources at your disposal, and when you have the opportunity to perhaps go outside and learn things which we haven't had to, you can do that. I think it's a lot more easier for you to do that in online debating as well, because it just doesn't take a lot of effort now for you to probably spend 1 weekend doing that. And I don't think that tournaments are perhaps the way for you to do it. I mean, for example, I personally host this platform called South Asian Spar, which essentially is a spar platform for South Asian debaters who come in, and for every single week we invited adjudicators. And we've had some incredible people come in and adjudicate for us. We've had Amrit, we've had Tin come in at one point, we had Nicholas come in. And it just means a lot for us to get feedback from these people in order to elevate our debating. I think you could probably volunteer at these programs. Or secondly, there are programs out of Nepal, like for example, Digital Matter Files. These are free sessions that you give, which basically anyone can attend, and these are freely available on YouTube. It basically takes none of your time. You basically come and give a session to all these kids and be perhaps better for it. I think it becomes really important for us then, because the importance of this is, I think, far like underplayed in these societies. And it just means a lot for you to do that. But I think second and more importantly, it's just also about making sure that it's a lot more accessible for us. But it's because I think there are a lot of for-profit tournaments that are happening currently, which do make a lot of money right now, which have the ability to perhaps subsidize us or perhaps make things a lot more easier for us in terms of attending it. Because it's not like that we aren't paying enough fresh fees because we don't want to. It's because it's just a lot more difficult for us. I think someone in the serious posting comment also mentioned, right? It's like 50 euros was like their university fees for that entire year. It's just a lot difficult for you to conceptualize giving this sort of money to a tournament for like 3 days of debating. I think at a point at which you can make that easier for us, it completely works. But I think lastly, in terms of what debaters can do, is even if you perhaps don't want to like be actively involved to the extent that perhaps I was talking about, just compete at our tournaments, because we do have good tournaments and we do have good adjudicate like cores. Right at this point, we do have good IAs. At a point at which I've seen it personally at NDU also, we made sure that we have enough subsidies for the IAs in terms of essentially giving them $50 to come at our tournaments. But I've seen a lot of people who've chosen other Western tournaments for far less amount of money just because they believe that, because they have a perception that, oh, they'll get better debates there than here. I think the conceptions about essentially debating in these countries should perhaps be broken, because at a point at which you begin to come to a lot of our tournaments, that just elevates the general quality of debating amongst yourselves, but secondly, also about, like, let's say, kids and people learning from your experiences, from your feedbacks, or just watching you debate in those rooms. I think that's really important for like smaller circuits to grow.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. And I think, yeah, you've touched on an important point, which is online makes a lot of this stuff so much easier. And it, you know, it shouldn't be, we should be leveraging that. And if, you know, some tournaments probably do cost too much. So I'd sort of like to move into the next thing. And I think you've already touched on a lot of this. So if you don't have, you know, as much to add here, that's totally fine. But I mean, I think it's clear that organizing these competitions means a lot. But what exactly does it mean? I mean, particularly like, rather than just, I don't know if I'm articulating myself very well, but rather than just like having local competitions or training sessions, why having like debaters come to you? Why is that so important? That aspect, I suppose. Fardeen.
Yeah. So it's many things. I think the first thing I would say is that when you organize an international tournament in your home country, you are probably among the first or among the very select few to have tried and pulled that off. Which means, of course, yes, you are under severe pressure to succeed, but when you pull it off, the amount of impacts you create are manifold and really, really valuable. One of the biggest things I would say is the aspiration it creates towards the sport itself. Because sometimes as debaters, we get stuck into this vacuum where we only see debate, but we have to realize that where do debaters come from, right? Debaters originate from school level, and we build them up to also continue debating in university. And then, of course, the rarer cases, people that start debating in university with no prior debating experience before that. For both of these category of people, there's no guarantee that debate is the extracurricular activity they're going to choose. Other extracurricular activities are getting really, really popular. So, you know, I started debating in 2000 and 2012. Back then, Model United Nations were not as popular as they are now, but they're really big now. Back then, online gaming had not completely like infiltrated teen culture and got them all hooked. There are just many things kids are doing now, and there's no guarantee that they'll pick debate, because kids want to be YouTubers, kids want to stream themselves playing games and make a career out of that. Kids want to do Model United Nations. They want to have their art, their music, their dance on TikToks and get viral. There are many things they're choosing to express themselves. So there's no guarantee that they're going to choose debate. So it's the responsibility of debating organizations or clubs to market debate and attract kids into debate in the first place. And that's where these tournaments come in. Like the first Ascension we did, it was actually really small in scale, just 34 teams in 2016. In contrast, the one you attended, Jessica, had 240 teams, I think, right? So it's a massive jump. But the reason people still loved that first Ascension was because we put in the effort to have it with a superhero theme. We put in the effort to make sure that there's a rock concert at the end of it. No one told us that we want these things, but we decided to try and do it because we wanted to make it an experience and not just a tournament. And after we had done that, we could see that other tournaments were also following that format in Bangladesh. So which means everyone was trying to make their event a cool event. And everyone realized that they're competing against other clubs, that they're competing for the share of mind of these kids to make debating their passion. So if we focus that, okay, we're organizing events not just to run a tournament, but to create an experience that kids will love and they will keep coming back for, that not only pushes you to design more unique events, it pushes more kids into wanting to try out debating. Kids that saw a video of kids entering a Harry Potter themed cafeteria and freaking out will want to see what happens when they go to that event themselves the next time. And that's the impact we've managed to create here. And I'm not saying like we invented this. We took a lot of inspiration, I would like to say, from North-South University and the ABP they organized in 2011. I was in school at the time, and I was not remotely anywhere near debating, but I would just hear from people about how this happened. An international tournament happened, and there was a concert, and there were all these foreigners partying. And you want to think like, okay, I would want to try something like that out. And then you stumble upon debating, and it becomes your passion. So you have to create that window and allow children to experience debating in such a way that it becomes their passion. Because yeah, you'll get a certain demographic who fall in love with debating for the beauty of the sport. But then there's another chunk of people who you have to sell it to, who you have to convince them that this is the sport for you. For that, tournaments play a huge role. And the second thing I would add is that, for an institution to be successful debate-wise, maybe you only need 2 or 3 debaters. But if you organize a tournament, you open the avenue to create an entire value chain of people who are good at finances, people who are good at marketing, people who are good at organizing socials, and you give everyone a chance to contribute and feel part of a debate club. And that makes debating a more attractive and inclusive activity. And, I think a really good example is that recently I got to convene UADC, and I feel very blessed to say that it was one of the easier roles I've had, because my 2 co-conveners, Preeti and Fatima, they did everything, and I was just sort of there. And Fatima was a timekeeper in Ascension 2017, and she had no exposure to debate before that. And then a few years later, she's organizing a UADC, and she doesn't debate. She just sort of fell in love with what's happening in these events and then wanted to be part of it. Similarly, Preeti from IBA-DU was an organizer at one of the tournaments we had from BDC called Shrivastav. And then she also does not debate per se, but then she took massive ownership of the idea of using debate to empower young women. And she has launched a lot of initiatives in Bangladesh to encourage female debating, like fempowerment like Shivolution Training Academy, and then she has organized events for IBADU. So when you're giving people a stage, you really can't predict how far they'll take the ball and run with it. But once you give them the scope, people can do great things. And that's what I believe organizing large-scale events is really important. You not only attract debaters, but you push everyone related to debating to sort of uplift themselves and take the bar even higher.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's actually just very touching. And I really do think that the Bangladeshi circuit and events that you've been involved with in particular have, I don't know, it seems to me like everyone's playing a role, and that's, you know, even if they're not like the best debater or something like that, and that's pretty cool. So what about you? What is why is it important that you know, your circuit hosts events, and is it important for you that debaters from other circuits participate in those events as well?
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to say, first off, it is important to me specifically because debating means, you know, more than I can express in words. At a certain point in my life, debating was the only thing I had going on. So it was more or less like an escape from depression, right? And so I enjoyed that, you know, socialization, that interaction that was only made possible at debating tournaments. Maybe some other people have other social things that they do, you know, that make them make friends or, you know, form other bonds that are stronger. But for me, specifically, debating became that special. So when we entered Rhetoric as a brand, it was specifically not just because of the kind of debating that was happening within here. It was because I've seen debating beyond the continent, right? So going online and then, you know, putting up on tournaments, seeing the amazing things that, you know, organizations in China are doing for debating for kids, seeing the stuff going on, you know, in England, for example, with the English-speaking union, and, you know, just seeing that people have sustained this debating culture from as little as, you know, primary school or early school to, you know, like people have organizations that have lasted for decades that are just focused on, you know, building debating culture for kids and for young people. So because I was inspired to start up, you know, an organization for debating from my experience outside Africa, that's why I know that hosting international tournaments where people outside Africa are able to attend would also mean a lot more to other people. Like I said initially, a lot of people here, particularly parents or older generation, don't necessarily see the value in debating beyond being just a hobby. And like I said, debating means more to me than just a hobby. So I like the fact that when you host international tournaments, people who have made debating more or less like a career or have built careers around their debating skills are able to attend there, and you're able to share those stories with the people in your circle or even with your parents, right? I've seen, you know, parents who didn't allow their kids, like in my particular university, who didn't allow their kids to go for tournaments. When we eventually convinced them and they were able to see that that this is something that is huge, right? People from other countries get to attend. They like kind of changed their perception, because to them it was just something you do for pastime, like just one other club you can join in school, not necessarily thinking of it as, you know, an important skill. So I think hosting, you know, international tournaments and having people from across the world attend those tournaments, attend those events, just goes a step forward to helping me specifically to convince young people around here that, you know, debating is something that is quite important and needs to be taken a lot more seriously. So I like the fact that it inspires people, you know, to do more for debating. It inspires because all of the challenges that people go through kind of pays off when they see that there are other people who have gone through that challenge, or there are other people who are at a place where you want to be in the next 4 years or in the next 5 years. You see that people have actually gone through it, and it's not like everyone around you is just, you know, taking it for a hobby. You are seeing that and that. So I think that has become important.
It just cut off in the last 5 seconds, but I think we got the most of it in the end, so all good. Thank you very much for that as well. And Apratim, what about you?
Yeah, so I've seen the direct impacts of what happens when you have like international teams come in and probably do well in perhaps your circuit or get to recognize you. Because I do remember, like, essentially when we started debating in Nepal, a lot of our arguments in themselves are pretty basic in terms of, oh, everyone just wanted to talk about what are the effects of these things, whether those effects are good or bad. I think when we had debaters, I think it was my third Mahasangram, which is our national BP competition, where people came in from the outside and we saw people making principles and being beautiful principles. We were like, we no longer want to perhaps just make those basic cases. We perhaps want to elevate our debating to an extent, which just makes debating seem a lot more accessible to you, which in the sense that debating, like good debating, isn't something that happens out there anymore. It's something that can happen in your home turf and something that you can perhaps be like a part of, which makes you perhaps work harder towards or just make you believe that you perhaps can do it. But I think more importantly, it's a lot more also about the world coming to you and you feel more included in essentially the global debating sphere or even the Asian sphere. Because I think the most apt example for this is we wanted to host UADC. I think Himalayan UADC was a bid back in 2018 or 2017 when Nepal wanted to host UADC. But we didn't have the money to go to UADC. We didn't have people that we knew inside UADC. So Shrivastav had to go and present our bid. And ultimately the bid was canceled because everybody was like, it's a circuit where people can't even come to like present their bids, to take questions. They just didn't trust the bid enough. I think from there to the extent to which like I felt essentially belonged enough in the like Asian circuit where I could perhaps go on and like compete in the UADC elections and perhaps become vice chair. It's a huge development that you have. And I think a lot of that is owed towards teams coming in or you perhaps going out to international tournaments, you interacting with teams, and you feeling more of a part of the global circuit that you are in. I think second thing that it does is it just makes those achievements a lot more, I think, important to you and important, like the way you look at those achievements essentially change. And this happened at, let's say, at this 2018 Ascension that we went to, which essentially I think was the year that like changed Nepali debating because of like them, it's because of which I keep referring to it. It was the Ascension where like Ang and I, my teammate, we won the high school category of that Ascension. Now, the thing that you had to see in that particular room was the Nepali contingent was just 30 people. But they made the loudest noise in that room. They drowned out the entire auditorium. We had people who actually cried then because they were like, we made it. Like that was our moment where we were like, we left a mark in Asian debating, and this perhaps is one of the best tournaments in Asia, and we belong ultimately. Like we no longer are that small circuit who comes to tournaments and doesn't break. And the next thing that you saw was the next WSCC team that we had was one of the best WSCC teams that we ever sent, with the highest speaker tally that we had, with the highest number of wins that we had. There was this one girl called Arohi within that who came back and who was like, no, we need to organize tournaments like this back home too. They organized this tournament called Kathmandu Worlds, one of the most beautiful tournaments. They somehow got Harish Narjajan to come to our country to like CA the tournament. We had IAs coming in from India. And all of that drive was because of the fact that people believed them. And I think that is the most important thing for like these smaller circuits, because I think more often than not, you just don't feel like it's a world that you belong in as long as you don't see the scale at which it operates at in your own home turf, where you see that, oh, there are other people in these other countries that are involved, and they aren't very different to what I am. They make similar arguments, they make similar cases. We think more or less the same way. I think that's somewhat important for a lot of these circuits. And I think that's why it's really important for a lot of these smaller circuits as well.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. That's, again, I think everything you've said is, all three of you is very touching, I think. And speaking of touching, I guess the next thing was just, I mean, you've shared quite a few examples already, so I don't know how many additional heartwarming stories you have, but I guess I was just wondering, are there any moments in your organizational experience that kind of, or even just more broadly, you know, don't feel restricted, that kind of made you go like, wow, this is cool, this is worth it, that sort of thing? Fardeen.
Yeah, I think two things. So the first one would be in 2017. That was the first time we had international teams coming to Ascension, and we were absolutely convinced that no one would come. You know, we were really worried no one would come, but you know, some teams did. We had of course the Nepali contingent. We had I would like to say NUJS from India. They have always been big supporters of us, and they came down. IIUM came down, NTU came down, and that meant so much to us. So that event, we did it with Harry Potter decor. And I remember a particular scene where when the participants entered the cafeteria, which we had rearranged to look like the Great Hall, I could see one of the debaters, one of the younger female debaters, she burst into tears because of how much she liked it. And at that point, it was a realization that, okay, this is really no longer just a debate tournament we're running. It's something that that can move people. And that was a big realization and a big motivation for us to keep pushing and keep pushing. And then I would say this year, when we had you, Lucia, Jason, Mubarak, Sarah, Amira, everyone coming down, I really felt that, of course I have my biases, but I really felt that that was the best adjudication core in an Asian tournament assembled ever. And the fact that it was happening in Bangladesh, and you guys were just there, that itself was mind-boggling. The fact that Oxford A was debating against Bangladeshi school kids, Nepali school kids, who it was mind-boggling. And every time I would walk past the hall, someone would come up to me and they would say that I can't believe I was debating against. I can't believe I was debating against them. You know, I've seen them on YouTube. I can't believe Lucy Arce was judging my debate. And I felt like one of those kids, because I have also admired all of these judges and debaters from afar growing up. In UADC 2016, which the team was Mubarak, Sarah, Amira, I watched so many of their rounds that tournament. They won, and I was so amazed by them. And the fact that I and my team could bring all of these people to Bangladesh, which was just a few years ago, like, you know, we would go to foreign tournaments and no one would really bother to, you know, talk to us or understand why we're here. From that to bringing the entire world to our circuit, letting them experience our hospitality, the way we do things, it was really moving. And what really pleases me is that, you know, the pandemic happened, and I'm really happy to see how so many Bangladeshi institutions, Indian institutions, Pakistani, Nepali institutions, of course in other continents as well, but I'll only speak for South Asia, they kept up the momentum to really keep this spirit up in online format. There was the IBA Nations League. There was, of course, a South Asian UADC. And I don't participate in tournaments as much anymore, but every day in my newsfeed, I see an Indian tournament, a Nepali tournament, a Pakistani Bangladeshi tournament, which has like WUDC Adj Core, EUDC Adj Core. And people, I think it's becoming so normal that people are forgetting just how immense that actually is, how immense the impact and scale of that actually is, and what it can do to the debater on the receiving end of that guidance. So being able to craft these moments is something I think I'll keep with me forever.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite debating memories too, even though that's such a basic white girl and couldn't eat some of the food, but you guys were too accommodating for me, which is what I remember. So, and you, next, is there any stories that kind of stay with you?
Yeah, I think there are quite a number. I'm just trying to keep them minimized. I like to think everybody likes validation. I equally like validation. So I think every time when I get validation from unexpected quarters, it kind of motivates me or inspires me to want to do more. I think I woke up the other day to the shout out on, I don't know how to pronounce that page. I think it's debating, they spell it DAE. And then they were like, you know, shout out to Eze and Mason, who have been doing, you know, amazing work at, you know, portraying the African debating experience and bringing it to the forefront to the rest of the world. So like that kind of, you know, made me realize that sometimes even when you are doing things that seem as though you are doing them within your closet, people are actually noticing. You may not always get all the kudos and, you know, ups and downs or all the stress, those particular times when it is happening, but people are, always paying attention. But then with every tournament we host, there's always been, a significant change I see in what the debating culture in Africa, for example, looks like. So before, tournaments moved online, or even before we started hosting the ones we were hosting in 2017, there was this huge disparity, gender disparity in the contingent squads, like squads that come from universities. You kind of notice that when people even manage to register 4 teams for PAUDC, for example, out of those 8 debaters, there's probably just only 1 female, or sometimes they bring all males and then maybe 1 female to come and observe or stuff like that. You kind of wonder whether this sport is an exclusive reserve for males. So I particularly like the fact that when we started hosting tournaments, 2017 online tournaments, we were able to see more women, do a lot of amazing stuff, or disprove that myth that the sport is specifically targeted for males. So I kind of love that. But also with the experience we had with Women's Open, it was also surreal, and that with that of the educator certification course. When we hosted the educator certification course, and we had about lots of people register from about 20 countries, it kind of made me feel that African speakers had something to offer, because out of the 5 trainers we had, 4 of them were Africans. Right? We just had Conor O'Brien, who also came in to help. He was the 5th person. So, but seeing that people from all over the world were registering to learn from African trainers, it was very sorry for me. It made me realize that we're doing a lot, to tell the world actually that the time developing is just because of lack of resources to bridge the absence of access, not necessarily because we don't have stuff to offer. So that was particularly very inspiring. Then at Women's Open, I was almost moved to tears because I slept and then I woke up in the morning and I checked the PayPal account. There was an anonymous contribution from someone in the US saying, we love what you guys are doing. I want to specifically, sign up these surprises and all of that, and encourage you to keep on going. And so, like, basically, all these stories are stories, of validation. I was watching there's a video, the school that won the online PAUDC we hosted in 2020 December, the Farming Equipment University of Science and Technology in Ghana. I was watching, a short video clip that they made, and the way they all gathered, over their of the amount of jubilation. It just makes me see that you may just be on your phone, on your computer, putting resources together, calling together. The experience you are creating in different parts of the world. If you animate that, it would be amazing to see that just from the comfort of your room, you can actually create multiple feelings and experience and emotions, from all around the world. And it's just so amazing to know that we've got this far, and debating affords you that much far. I'm not sure, if there are any other campus sports that give you that amount of leverage. And I think that's particularly inspiring.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And finally to you, Apratim.
Yeah, so I do have like a couple of stories that I want to share. I think one of the first moments I remember of like the circuit being really excited was when Harish decided to come to see at a tournament. And all the WhatsApp groups, or like all the messenger groups that existed then for debates, all just blew up like simultaneously. I was not in India, I was not in Nepal at that particular time. I was back in India where I studied. And I remember every single person was so excited, to the point that even during the tournament, those debaters who had probably debated here in Nepal back in, I think, 2017 or 2018, who left for a different country, texted in to ask what teams, like what Nepali teams is Harish touching right now? What's going on? What like teams are there in the tournament? And I think the most amazing thing for us was when Harish, I think, told one of our debaters that, oh, this speech was probably one of the best like speeches that we've heard in these tournaments. That's the biggest thing for us. Like, I remember we were so excited by the fact that like Harish said that and he's come at a tournament that, yeah, that was really beautiful. The second time I remember is we were organizing this tournament called Mahasangram, which is our national BP. The third Mahasangram, which happened like right before like one of our major international tournaments. And I was sitting in DNN office, and Pawan, who was the head of DNN at a particular time, just told me that, oh, we have 100 registrations for like Mahasangram. And I was like, wait, how many Nepali teams? Turns out we had 90 Nepali teams registered for a tournament here. The circuit was so small when I joined in, and to imagine that we'd have a tournament of, let's say, 90 teams come in because of the fact that we've just done so well and they're excited about like the project that we have, it was genuinely incredible to like witness the growth of Nepali circuit like so visibly like that in front of you. I think the third and the most important moment was right here for Nepal Debate Open, where, again, guys, do come to Nepal Debate Open. It's one of our most ambitious tournaments that we're organizing. Jessica is part of the core. They're incredible. We texted cores that we'd want to have at a tournament, and we weren't sure that they'll say yes, but we just want to text them because we want to tell ourselves that at least we did it. Like, at least we texted these people. So we texted Hamza, and Hamza said yes. And texted Tim, and Tim said yes. And you said yes, and Wasif said yes. And we'd never imagined that we'd ever in Nepal have a core of this level. And yeah, it was perhaps one of the most exciting things that we've seen. Like the tournament itself is like one of the most exciting tournaments that we're going to have in our country. And that's incredibly beautiful. I think there's something that you guys need to know about Jessica is for the tournament, we offered Jessica subsidy. And Jessica said, yeah, no, I don't need subsidy. I'll come and do your tournament just for that. And like, I really do hope that more people do that for circuits. Like Jessica simply said, yeah, you can use this money to subsidize other teams in Nepal who'd probably want to participate. And I think, yeah, it's really important that like more debaters, perhaps who have the ability to do that, who have the access, who are just there, who can help circuits, please do that because it's really important for us. Yeah, I think that those are the important moments where I went, yeah, it's great. Sorry, just emotional.
No, that's so kind of you to say. I'm very excited for this competition. So thank you for sharing that. Well, look, just in the interest of time, we've sort of gone over the hour. So I might just do a wrap up and just ask you, are there any parting thoughts you'd like to leave us with? And then I'll quickly see if any of the audience have questions, and then we can close this session. But Fardeen, is there any parting thoughts, any messages, words of wisdom you'd like to leave?
Yeah, I would just say that I've been following the discussion that's been happening, on serious posting, and there's been a lot of like really important points coming up, especially things like remuneration for adjudication core members, which I'm fully on board with. I just think that sometimes experienced debaters, judges, it's important that we also make a value judgment on if we can afford to do it. We should calculate how much help we can potentially provide to a circuit or to an institution. Because the Bangladesh Debating Council that I worked in for many years, it's in many ways it's a charitable organization. So I could see firsthand that when we go to a new district in Bangladesh or a new institution and we sort of introduce debating there, I can see the knock-on effect it has on the students of that organization, and it's extremely fulfilling. So if you ever have the opportunity to kickstart a tournament or an institution and their debating culture, it will mean a lot to not just those people, but also to you down the line, is something that I truly believe is true. And you won't realize your impact immediately, but once you see it, you'll feel great. Like I had no idea when I was interacting with the Nepali circuit that they would blow up the way that they did. It was just, it just happened in conversation. It wasn't like some grand plan or anything. We just went with the flow, and we can see results. So it was the same for Malaysia and how much they helped Bangladesh. And I can think of circuits like Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Cambodia, Maldives, who aren't as present always as they perhaps can be. But right now is the time for people to go in and maybe kickstart these circuits. And it's not even just about countries. Like there are potentially cities or institutions within your circuit. All they need is for someone to sort of light the match and any debater or any judge can potentially be that person. So if you have the opportunity to help, go ahead and take it. Selflessly, it will help. Like selflessly, it will help a lot of people, but even in selfish, vain reasons, you'll feel really good about it. So I think in both ways, there's benefits.
Wise parting words. Thank you. Eze, how, any final words of wisdom from you? Any messages you'd like to leave?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be done for debating globally, but it's also important that sometimes we, cast our minds back and say thank you to those who have done some extent of work. I like all the shout out that's going out to you, particularly. I also remember you at our Women's Open. We have this Royal Rhetoric YouTube page where we've uploaded, quite a number of training materials, and like all the people, all the like wonderful experienced speakers that obliged us and did those trainings, like they put us in for free and then allowed us to put that content on the page. So it's always very great to hear, young speakers in Africa say, oh, I listened to Milo's, on your channel, talking about this particular topic in debating and learning from all of that. So I just want to say, the names are numerous, but I just want to say a big shout out to, everyone who is doing everything that we have said here. Like there's a lot to be done, but everyone who is changing something at their own little corner, people like you, people like Conor, people like Ben Jackson, I think Milo, yeah, Martha, Elewin, Nunando, David James, Andrew Mason, and like there are lots and lots and lots of names, also. So I like that, people are doing, to appreciate, all the institutions that, because I think just like we're talking about people from other developed sections who are accepting to judge or CA tournaments in Africa or other, less privileged sections, I think also that we have gotten to that point where some institutions are beginning to also see that there's a lot of value that can be added to things like your core decision panel when you have people from these otherwise, less privileged sections. My boy in Juguna, Makaya, was on the Manchester IG, CAP, and I think it's also there for Southampton Open later this weekend. So, those kind of things are very, very fun, because in Africa, for example, East Africa is one of the youngest sections. So it's like a beacon, right? To see that someone from East Africa, is able to be on the Adj Core for some of the tournaments. We watched their videos on YouTube when we were beginning to debate at that time, and you see your peers being there. So I like to say a big thank you to everyone who is doing all of these things. And I also want to say a shout out to the organizing team for Madrid 2023. I do hope that the bid gets to go through. And I'm excited to be advising that bid, because just like I said in the document, WUDC for me is more or less like the it's like the Oscar. It's like Ballon d'Or. Right? It's something that you want to share, and I'm convinced that this particular bid is able to provide that access that Black debaters or African debaters have been clamoring for all through the years, right, or in the past decade. So I'm very much psyched for the Madrid 2023 bid, and all the best.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I hope that opportunity does eventuate.
Seconded.
Thanks, guys. And lastly, you, Apratim, any final words?
Yeah, I think Fardeen and Eze have covered most of what I wanted to say. But I think it's just important for people to realize that debate as an activity is really difficult for us to properly follow and sustain, especially in these countries. And for that, we really, really need your help. So if you have tournaments outside, if you have the kind of funding, do give us please publicize the subsidy application, so at least we see that you have subsidy so that we can apply. If you see our tournaments, do come participate, because I think for most people, it just might be a tournament that they see on their feed. For a lot of our circuits, it's the tournament that perhaps can, to a certain extent, push our circuit to a next level, or change a lot of things, or just make it a lot more easier for people to be like, you know what, debating might just not be a complete waste of time for me. I don't need to leave this activity, which most houses and homes perhaps force you. But I think more importantly, I'm also really glad that this circuit is just having a lot more conversations around the fact about representation, around the fact about accessibility, and ensuring that these things come. And I think for that, again, I'm really, really grateful to Madrid WUDC for like doing that and at least making sure that there's a platform that exists here for us to have this conversation. Lastly, guys, NDO is happening. Please do come to our tournament. We're going to give you an insane tournament. We have everything for it. But yeah, thank you guys. And thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much. And I was going to say you should give a quick plug if you hadn't already to the competition. Does anyone in the does anyone who is still with us in the Zoom call have any questions for the whole panel or any specific members of the panel? Honestly, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask, or you could message in the chat. I'll give you a couple minutes to consider if you've got any questions for our panel. Anyone? Don't be shy. I'm going to read it out. The question is, thank you guys for this conversation. I have a question. We have a debating society which is part of university. The university doesn't support us that much. How can you increase the support of your university towards the debating society? So just anyone, if anyone's got any thoughts here, jump in. Does anyone have any experiences with that, Eze?
Yep, I can totally relate to that experience. In 2017, for example, I attended the PAUDC in Cameroon on a boat. Like I had to do a 6 hours because it was the cheapest thing to do because the university wasn't funding, and so we had to seek alternative funding and we had to do that quickly. So in fact, I ended up missing 2 rounds of that tournament, but managed to break at it. But the shocking thing was that after breaking, and then I was best country speaker at that tournament, and I came back. Like I literally risked my life. I don't know how to swim, and then I had to do like a water trip, to go to another country. But when I came back, and that year, in that same December, there was a convocation in my school, and I was shocked to see that in my vice chancellor's convocation address, he had specifically mentioned that students from the university made them proud in Cameroon. And I was surprised because they didn't fund the tournament at all, like zero funding, and we managed to attend, but they were still, I wouldn't say shameless, but they were still proud enough, to mention it in things like the convocation. So I do think that universities oftentimes, just like everything I've explained all through this conversation, universities oftentimes want to see results, right? So sometimes, even though you expect them to give you support before results, sometimes they reverse that. So they want to see results before support. So advice I'm going to, if you are able to seek alternative funding and send just your best team or just give it a shot and attend this tournament and send in the report. Trust me, as you continually send this report, every university I've encountered in my job as a coach and all of that, every university loves the PR. I've been to university to coach their students, and the funding I received for translation and all of those logistics were basically contributed by the debaters themselves to enable me to be there. But afterwards, and they attend the tournament, they attend and make a little bit of success, their universities or their colleges are happy about that progress that has been made. So universities like to see results. I do think that even now that tournaments are cheaper because you are doing it online, I think that every tournament your university or your institution attends and every accolade you record or everything you benefit should be properly documented and sent back to the institution. If you would need to reach out to the organizing committee to send you things like citations or certificates just to prove that you are at that tournament and that you are doing this, the universities love to see that you are putting in the effort, and then that support is going to come definitely. So I'm just going to advise that you use this particular online season where the costs are lower and you can raise them alternatively. Use this online season to use a lot of back the institution, and I hope that you will get your turn. All the best.
Yeah, I would just add on that to Olga's question, that I think what Eze said is really important, because it's ironic that sometimes we as debaters, we talk a lot, but we forget to sell. And talking and selling are two different things. And the reality is you have to sell this activity to your stakeholders if you're from a developing circuit. Without that, it's very hard for you to get their support. So I think what he said about sending reports to your administration is really important. But another aspect is it may happen that you don't have a teammate or you're unable to debate to get results and send progress reports in the first place. In that case, you can sort of dial it back one step, and you need to open dialogue with your institution about the benefits it has for the institution. Because being very honest, not all institutions are benevolent. Universities also have profit-making motive. Either they're interested in commercial profit or they're interested in like maximizing their reputation as a institution that has like great things or fun activities or a good reputation happening in there. And you have to sort of show them that debating can be the route for them to get that. In Bangladesh, and I've also seen in foreign circuits in Malaysia, I think I've seen it happen really impactfully in Malaysia, in institutions like Taylor's and IIUM. They've really sold the importance of to that institution. And thus they've gotten the institutional support. Similarly, in Bangladesh, we've seen universities like BRAC and IUB and North South University who have a lot of funding, but don't necessarily know where to channel that fund effectively. Proactively, they've been sort of taught that, look, if you invest in the debating community, there are smart kids here who will one day want to join your debating program if you can make it look like an appealing debating program. So if you can get this mindset into the institution's head that they're not just funding you and your teammate, they're building a program which will be a tool to attract students from across the country or across the globe for years to come, that might increase the focus that your institution wants to give. Like I know that even administrators from our university in Bangladesh have gone all the way to Nepal to interact with students in Nepal, and even sponsored a debating tournament in Nepal. That's how much we were able to convince them that they not only funded our circuit, but they were funding another circuit. And I know this happens in Malaysia as well. I know it happens in parts of South India as well with their WSDC program. So it's a model that does exist out there if you can show the institution the right incentive and right reason to invest in you and into the art of debate.
Yeah, if I may just add something very quickly. I think you need to ask for help as well from debaters outside your institution, right? Because I've had a very personal experience with, my coach when I was starting up. He had gone to Cameroon from Nigeria. He had gone to Cameroon and went to the University of Ria and actually sought audience with their vice chancellor and convinced their vice chancellor to fund their participation in PAUDC that particular year. The reason why it seemed like it worked is because the foreigner effect works on everyone, right? So we may all be friends, and you sometimes seem to forget that I'm a foreigner to your country or to your school, right? So, but when people from your administration see that someone from external, like an external body, was able to come and help you plead that your case, then they're almost likely going to be willing to support. So ask your friends, from other clubs or from other circuits who are able to make that sacrifice for you. I've personally gone to schools just because I knew that it was going to afford me an opportunity to have a one-on-one with their vice chancellor and tell them what debating is doing outside. Because schools oftentimes don't believe their students. They don't believe you came there to study and get a degree and get out. But when they see or when they hear from someone externally that debating is something worth investing in, oftentimes they're willing to give it a try, even if not because they are doing it out of their free will or magnanimity of their heart, but sometimes they're doing it to save face because they don't exactly know who that foreigner is and how much feedback, how their feedback to the rest of the circuit can affect their PR. So be bold external to be able to speak to your management or just come around for your tournament. Organize internal tournaments, start small, right? Organize an inter-departmental competition or who is proud that, you know, and I invite people from other, you know, regions or other circuits to attend that particular tournament and be able to plead your case. So sometimes you sell yourself by showing, like just like Fardeen said, by showing, you know, that value first and foremost. Most universities don't know what they are funding. That's the truth. They're ignorant. They don't know what debating is and why it's important. So you need to show them that by attracting the debating circuit to your.
Thank you for that. Apratim, did you have any thoughts on this question? Otherwise, I think there's been some pretty good answers.
Yep. I think it covers most of it. I'm probably the worst person to ask because I come from Nepal and India, and I go to an engineering college which has students to competitive exams. So my university, again, doesn't care a lot about debating, and I quite resonate with your problem because I remember for most of my tournaments, the out rounds happen on Monday, and I have classes on Monday as well, and I would never get like any sort of leeway from the university. But we're trying to like convince them. I think the way that we're trying to do it is by making sure that we have enough students. So the scale tells them that this is important for the student community and therefore they invest. And I think second and more importantly that we're doing by showing that we have these achievements and it's kind of important for like the university's image overall in India. And I do hope it works, but currently I don't think I'm in a position.
Fair enough. Are there any other questions for our panel? Otherwise, you'll have the opportunity on the Discord to leave questions in the relevant channel. So I guess in the interest of time, we might leave that there. I would like to thank all of you for your time and for sharing your thoughts. Really appreciate it. I think it's been very insightful, and I'm sure everyone listening has also found your comments and your advice extremely useful.
I can't believe people were actually here listening. Very cool. Very cool.
More